Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you good, yes.
Good. How are you?
I'm great. It's always a good day here in Florida. How are you?
Yeah, yeah. I've been to Florida several times and I know what you mean. Um,
Where do you live?
I'm on the Norfolk coast.
Okay,
Um,
yeah. I guess
yeah,
we've been there a few times, West Runton Pavilion and all that.
indeed. Indeed.
I think
And
I think I might have played in Norwich Cathedral one time actually.
did you?
I believe so. When I did my first Christian tour, I just did cathedral, so I think I was in Norwich.
Really? Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I remember seeing you at West Runton a few times. Well, once anyway. Um, I don't know. You probably won't remember, but I came backstage and we were in the dressing room and some guy came in, wanted the single, wanted your new single signed, and you got me to sign it as well, even though I wasn't part of the band. But yeah, it was a while ago.
Okay, well, I'm glad you remember that.
Well, that's one of them things will always stick in your mind. But Sal, you started off with your first band, The News.
Yes.
Yeah, how did that come about?
Hmm. Okay, I'm getting old now, so to remember these kind of details, people don't usually ask me about that. So I really have to go way back. Let me think. Uh, I suppose it was a kind of evolution, that most musicians have from school bands to changing one person, adding another person, that kind of thing. The one of the interesting features back then was in the pre-internet days, of course, we had music papers and especially Melody Maker, where all the musicians used to advertise.
Mm.
So every time there was a vacancy, then I guess we'd place an ad and audition some people, and that's kind of how it went, really.
Yeah, and then because obviously you then moved in with Classic Nouveaux, but yeah,
Well,
sorry.
well, the news thing, indeed, not just that, but you could say my whole career changed really when we first of all got a manager.
Right.
And so this particular manager, he actually went in to the same record company with the same demo tape that had turned me down 6 months earlier, and we got a deal and loads of money. And so if there happens to be anybody watching who is an aspiring rock star or something, then get a manager is the moral of that story.
Because two of the members were from X-Ray Specs, weren't they?
Well, yes, this relates to the news thing because we had this record deal and we were in the studio twice with top producers and we had all this money to buy all the best equipment of the day, the first synth guitar that was out there, the first polyphonic Moog keyboard. And as we were in our second session, the head of the record company came in and he said, "You haven't given up your day jobs, have you?" And we were too young and ignorant to know what that really meant. But to make a
Yeah.
long story short, one single came out and then we were dumped unceremoniously. So it doesn't matter if your record deal says you've got 5 years and all these advances and everything. When they decide it's over, it's over.
And that was what with the news?
Yes.
Or
Uh,
ah,
yeah. And so I kind of thought, I'm done with bands then, and or at least with forming them and being responsible for them. So I'll go and join somebody else's band.
mm,
And so in the Melody Maker that particular week, it was the era of punk, of course, you have to understand. And so all bands either were or wanted to be punk bands.
mm.
So one of them I went to was somebody a bit known. I can't remember their name now. I do remember that the guitarist in the band, I knew him already. He used to be, I think he was the original guitarist with the Police before they were famous.
All
Uh,
right.
Henry, his name was. But I don't remember what the name of the band was, but they were known. They might have had one or two hits. So I went to them, and then the next one was X-Ray Specs. And what happened there was interesting because um, two of the members of all the people they auditioned, two of the members liked me and my stuff, and to them like somebody else. And so it was really BP, the drummer, who that night said to me, I want to form a band with you in.
Right.
And so I wasn't really sure I wanted to form a new band, but he did anyway. And so I always credit him with being the founder of Classix Nouveaux, really.
Yes. But you, did you have a number one here? I can't quite remember.
No, not really in England. I think we kind of just about nudged the top 10 or something, and that was our highest moment.
Because you know, I was convinced you did have a number one, but is it a dream? But then I was thinking to myself, you foresaw the future with Tokyo, you know, sort of, you know, when you listen to the lyrics of it, it's sort of, yeah, it's where we are, isn't it?
Well, probably it would have been better if it was about China, wouldn't it, really?
Well, Tokyo's in China in my mind. But then the band, they just split up, or what happened there, sort of thing.
What you mean, Classix Nouveaux?
Yeah.
Well, after our third album, the record company decided to dump us, and so a couple of the members didn't want to continue, and then a couple of them did, and so we had a few sort of changes of lineup out of the spotlight, and then in the meantime, I released my own single, and it became a hit, of course, and then all of a sudden, people wanted me to do my thing more than they wanted the band to do its thing.
Yes, because you went on to have quite a good solo career, didn't you?
Well, bear in mind back then, and indeed for most of the early decades of rock and roll, bands usually only lasted a few years. You know, the Beatles, what was that, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that?
Yeah.
And so the idea of bands lasting for decades and decades, or coming back, or trying to recreate their glory days when they're in their 70s, that was not even thought of back then. The first time we were in New York, actually, I remember our American agent was very excited. He said, "I've got some tickets to see the Stones tonight. We want to see if they can still rock at 40."
Yes, they still are.
Yeah, so that was quite a novel idea that anybody over 40 would be trying to rock and roll, really.
Yes, I know. I was something I always say about Gary Newman as such, and I was talking to Beggar's Banquet, and Steve Webben said to me, he said, most people have a 2-year range. They'll be on top of the world for 2 years, and then 90% of them will start to go down, if you know what I mean. So,
well, especially in England, because things move very fast in England, because it's very small, it's very concentrated, and the media too. You know, you can really be an overnight sensation as a teenager. I remember when Boy George, from just being a weird guy around clubs, overnight suddenly he's a superstar nationally and eventually internationally, because you can do that in England. But you cannot do that in other places, certainly not here in America, because it's so huge and so kind of regional that it takes bands years to even become a national phenomenon. Bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, you know, they took them long enough to become big in California, and then many years more. REM, you know, another one would be like that. It took years and years and years before they really become known.
Yeah, well, exactly. But then after Classix, and you went into you then I was going to say found God, but obviously that's not quite the right word for it, is it?
Well, I was brought up as a Catholic, went to Catholic school, and like most Catholics, I had no idea about what faith was about or whether God was really there. And much later on, after I tried the other path, I discovered he was actually. So it was worth realigning my life, really, and my work.
Yeah, I like that. You tried the other paths. But it's because now you're
Today I'm just a humble church choir director in Florida.
Oh, right, okay. Because at one point you were doing something a little bit more, weren't you?
Well, what could be more than being in a beautiful place, being happy with what you do, with nice people, all that, that is the more, as far as I'm concerned. But I will have
Yeah,
been, actually, a couple of weeks ago, it was my anniversary of 21 years in America. And
right.
so for about the first 15 years, I was touring around and the different states, and I was still giving concerts and things like that. And it's really only since I've been here in Florida the past 5, 6 years that I settled down, and I don't really go anywhere anymore.
But what do you find the difference? Say going back to the old days where you would play a big concert. I mean, I don't know what the biggest concert you ever played was, but a lot of people. Where now you're doing the same thing, but on a small scale.
Yes. Well, you know, in the past, playing in these big festivals, maybe with 100,000 people, it's in a way kind of impersonal.
Mm,
You're gazing at crowds far, far away. They're people you'll never know, you'll never speak to, you'll never meet in most cases. And over recent years, I pretty much play for the same few hundred people every week. And
mm.
so some of them come up to me and they talk to me, and sometimes about the songs or whatever. And in a certain way, it's kind of more rewarding.
Yes, yes, I can imagine so. Yeah, I mean, but you always classed Classix as or Classic Nouveaux as a rock guitar rock band.
Yeah, well, I think synthesizers were just coming into their own at that time.
Yeah.
So we were interested in exploring new sounds that had not been heard before. And so we had a vocoder, and we did some things with drum boxes. We were probably one of the first to really be using synth drums.
Mm.
Um, but I guess it was really guitar rock music that inspired us all. And so, where there were some who might have been perhaps more inspired by Kraftwerk to just be synthesizers on their own, and
Yeah.
I can enjoy that, but it isn't quite as fun when it comes to performing. And so,
No.
for instance, in the early days, when Depeche Mode became very big and they started to play big gigs, it was kind of boring because it was just a
Mm.
bunch of guys standing at a synthesizer. Whereas
I know.
you just can't beat the energy of bashing drums and strumming guitars and all the posing and everything. And in our case, particularly, BP, I sometimes tell my drummer now, you know, I used to have this big guy and he had huge speakers like either side of his ear, and it must have been deafening, but he bashed the skin so hard, you know,
Oh, yeah.
it was a lot of fun.
But then you joined, you made another band, the Rockets. Was that
Well, I didn't, yeah, I didn't make it.
okay?
They were established before Classix. They existed in Europe in the, well, sort of late 70s. I think they started around 76.
Oh,
And
right.
they were French. And they were kind of like, with hindsight, you could say they were sort of like Kraftwerk meets Pink Floyd. And but visually more like Kiss, because they all had the head shaved, and
Yeah.
they wore silver paint on their faces and spacesuits. So
Nice.
I guess you could sort of bring Daft Punk in there as well. I'm sure Daft Punk would say Rockets were among the people who influenced them. But anyway, make a long story short, they went to Italy and they became a huge sensation. And so they were like one of the two top bands in Italy. They sold 1.5 million albums. And I'd met them kind of early on, around the time of Classix, actually. And then as things were shifting a bit with Classix, they told me they were looking to try and go a bit more international. So they asked me if I would guest on a couple of songs on their current album. And
Mm.
one of the songs turned out to be a top 20 hit in Italy. So they
Nice.
asked me to go over and tour with them, and that was most enjoyable for a whole month. I was in a great Italian restaurant for lunch and dinner, and that was that really. Oh, and I got paid as well. They did actually, yeah, they did actually come and record one album in London as well. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
But they actually exist in some shape or form today, where one of the original members got a whole bunch of younger guys, and they're huge in Russia now. They go and do these big stadium concerts in Russia with amazing light shows, laser light shows, and all that kind of thing. And so, well, you know,
Are you ever tempted?
oh no, no, no. I like Florida. I don't want to leave Florida. I'm hoping nobody in my family dies or gets married and expects me to leave Florida for them.
It is. Whereabouts in Florida are you?
I live in Orlando, where Disney lives.
Oh, you're in Orlando. Yeah, because I used to always go down to Fort Myers, which is
yeah. There's lots of beautiful places in Florida, and it's very diverse from one spot to another. But being in the middle has its advantages, because hurricanes are usually very common here at a certain time of year. But this year we were spared.
But there's often been a lot of talk and speculation of people wanting Classix Nouveaux to reform to do anything. Would that be anything what would interest you, or is that just never going to happen?
Well, I think that on the one hand, as you get older, you always think, if I had the chance again, I could do it better, you know? And
Well, that's true.
so in life, we probably all have those kinds of thoughts. But then there's also another thought, which is, at the age I am now, I wouldn't try and fit into the clothes that I wore when I was 20. So trying to do what you did 40 years ago, it just always seems a little bit odd to me. But I like the guys, you know, we're sort of friendly now. And so if there was really a demand for it, then we might consider it, but I don't think that's very likely. And also there's something to be said for remembering things as they were. You know, I'm a bit of a kind of subscriber to the Greta Garbo school of thought, where you know, I want to be left alone in seclusion and remember me in my heyday. Well, remember as I used to be, rather than as I am now.
There's a certain element of truth in that. I know exactly what you're saying. You know, it is great. So where do you find you've had your success? You've done all that. You're living in beautiful Florida. Where do you find yourself now with everything in the world, what's going on, and you know, etc.?
Well, I think that as you get older, you usually become kind of what would be considered maybe politically more conservative, because you see the good things that are worth conserving, and you see things from more of a kind of global perspective rather than just your narrow area of interest. And so I'd say I'm a bit concerned with how younger people in the West, whether it be Britain and Europe, whether it be America, don't seem to appreciate what we have in terms of freedom and I mean, just all the good things, all the positive things that we've always known in our lifetime, to live in a free country. And so this move towards Marxism again, which has always been tried and failed, I think is kind of disturbing. And so I'm glad that I'm getting old, so I'm probably not going to be around too much longer to see the world going in that direction, because it seems like it would be a terrible shame to lose all the freedoms that we have. I mean, I don't know if you really want to get into major politics, but here in America right now, there's a big story where Twitter and Facebook banned a story that was negative to the challenger, Joe Biden.
Oh, right, okay.
Just to try and stop the public hearing about it. And so that kind of totalitarianism is reminiscent of the Soviet Union or communist China today. So that's the direction of the world is a little bit disturbing, but I'm sure old people say that and always did to us when we were young.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the difference is nowadays everyone's got this in their hand, and you know, my daughter, who's now 20, had told me something, and I said, "Did you read that on Facebook?" And she went, "Yeah." I said, "I don't want to know anymore because, it's like you say, they put out what they want you to hear or read or whatever."
I'm surprised that she even knew about Facebook, because I thought that's for old people. Young people are on Instagram and lots of kind of other things that I haven't even heard of, I think. But,
yes, indeed. I'm told Facebook is dying and you need to be on Instagram. And I think I don't really need to be on Facebook, let alone Instagram, because I don't know what's going on half the time.
Well, I think that there are a lot of good things with the technology. I guess people imagine either when you get old you're against anything new, or I see sometimes on Facebook some of the Classix Nouveaux fans thinking that the reason we won't get back together is because I'm a Christian. And I messaged BP one day, I said, being a Christian doesn't make me disapprove of rock and roll. I've got nothing against classics, and I enjoy music just as I always did.
Exactly.
And as far as the technology goes, see, in my church choir, I have a lot of young people, and my piano player, he's 15 years old. I've got three of them that are 15. I've got a couple that are younger. And anyway, this boy is a genius, and he taught himself to play on YouTube.
Right, okay, yeah.
He never had any piano lessons. He learned Bohemian Rhapsody and came along and said, "I want to play." He didn't know what a chord was, funnily enough. I didn't realize until about a year in. He told me when he joined us, he didn't know what chords, he didn't know the chords existed. But anyway, that's what kids do. They find stuff on YouTube, they learn. And then recently he said he wanted to start learning to program music, like to do beats and things like that. But he didn't have a suitable computer. And so I just bought him a Mac recently. And I'm kind of proud of that and excited to hear what he's going to do, because these kids are amazing. We had to kind of learn the technology as it came out, but they grow up with it. And so to me, it's very, very fascinating, the ideas of young people. And I've spent probably most of my life really relating to the young. And so it's very exciting to me, just what's possible. Let's put it that way. I'm always fascinated with possibilities. And so as long as there's new challenges and so on, then life is worth living.
Of course. So where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
Might be dead, actually. It would be surprising. A lot of people in bands younger than me have died, but on the other hand, my father and my grandmother lived till they were 85, so I might be around for a while yet. But I have no idea, really. I think as long as there are new challenges and there's something to be excited about, then life is worth living. I would not have visualized where I am today and what I'm doing today. I was 15 years living in Chicago, and it was only towards the end I thought about, well, it'd be nicer really in Florida where the sun shines. And, the idea of working for a church and directing choir was certainly not anything I ever really had in mind.
But you loved it.
Well, I've grown into it. Like most other things, you kind of learn how to do it. Now I'm pretty good at writing arrangements and all that kind of thing. I'm just finishing recording an album of my choir and all of the songs I've written for them over the past 3 years. There's 20 or 21 songs on the album. And that's something that's really quite new, because I never really recorded an album of all the choir before, actually. Of course, I've had a few songs where I had choirs on backing, but to do a whole album that's just a choir, I had to sort of learn how do you do that? How do you make it work? How do you make it sound good? And I found myself listening to one or two things that sort of inspired me, and I might not have listened to otherwise. And so it expanded my musical horizons as well. So I'm much more rounded as a musician today than I ever was when I was famous and successful, you might say.
I should think it's hard work, actually. It is Sounds like it should be easy, but I bet it isn't.
Well, no matter what the style of music or the artist or the lineup, because I produced quite a few things by other artists as well, and it's always a battle because music doesn't really have any rules. I know they teach you rules, you know, in music school they teach you rules, and these days they even have all these schools for studio techniques and all this kind of thing. Here in Orlando, we have a very good one, very famous one actually. But in the end, music is just what you hear and feel. And
Indeed.
it's, does it sound good to you? Does it feel good? And so to me, making music is like making a work of art. I don't mean to say that every song or every production is like Beethoven. What I mean is that with art, like I paint as well, not often, but I've been known to paint. When you paint, usually you kind of battle with your shapes and colors and whatever it is that you're doing to make your picture. And then if you're lucky, you hit a certain point, it's like, that's it. That's what I was going for. But until you get to that point, it can be very discouraging. You know, with an album, like I say, this particular album I'm working on is 20 or 21 songs. It started out as 27, and I gradually started cutting them because some of them I just couldn't really make them work. And they work when we sing them at church, but with a recording, you need something different because it's got a cold, like jump out of the speakers and touch the listener.
Yeah.
And it can be very hard to do that, to just find the element, to find the right way of doing it. And
exactly. Yeah.
With every album I've ever made, there's always been at least one song that was difficult. And I remember when we were doing the third Classix album, it was called Secret, and there was one particular song on there. Every single day, I'd go to the studio and they'll say, should we try that song again? So every morning, I'm singing this song, could never somehow get it right. And I don't know if we ever ended up with something that we were really satisfied with, or we just settled for this is the best we're going to get. But that particular song became huge, #1 in Poland. It's still, with Polish people today, it's one of the songs, along with Sandemiano, that they will always remember the best. And so it ended up touching people. You know, that's the reality. That's what happened.
No, I mean, because you had #1 in Poland, Portugal, Israel, and Iceland.
At least. Those are some of the ones we know about, yeah.
But what struck me was Iceland, and I was just thinking, well, Iceland, I don't, yeah.
Well, one of our biggest countries actually used to be Finland.
Really?
We toured Finland many times. We got one of our guitarists from there, Jimmy Suman, at one point. And so half the year it's depressing and completely snow-covered. And probably less than half the year it's beautiful and green. That's Finland. But for whatever reason, they just liked our stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. But so, to finish off, never say never, then you might, if the timing and everything was right, do a one-off or reform for a couple of gigs?
Well, I don't know about gigs. I think that would be much more difficult because two of us live in America and two live over in the British Isles. So there's, first of all, that challenge. And secondly, everything connected to concerts these days has become so expensive. I see on the Classix pages on Facebook, I see people posting old posters and tickets, and they used to pay £1 to go to a gig back then. I've only been to a couple of gigs since I've been here in Florida, and I think they were at least $60 for a ticket. And so I think to be able to come up with the kind of money it would need to ever do anything worthwhile live, apart from
the problem is, and I say this all, in fact I was talking to someone earlier today, the music industry's turned itself on its head. Whereas you used to make money out of albums, but now everyone makes money out of touring. Hence the fact, if I want to go and see Gary Newman, I'm paying £40 for a ticket now. And if I want to see bigger people, I'm talking, like my daughter's a big Taylor Swift fan. I mean, we're talking £100 upwards, you know, because well, I would say that's where they make the money, but some people don't need the money anyway. But that is where it is, isn't it? You know, it's
Well, but also it's an industry. It's kind of like, it's really like a factory, because you've got such a big staff, because the way that the technical side of shows has gone, you know, with the staging and all the stuff that goes on. When you think about people like Katy Perry or whoever the biggest stars are, and the amount of people that they have to employ just for special effects and things like that. And so you don't generally just pick up some guitars and drums and go out and play anymore. that's the dark ages. And so that's why I think it highly unlikely we would ever give a live performance again. But to record together again would certainly not be totally out of the question. But I have my doubts. Let's put it that way. I'm not against it. I'm not against it, but I don't think it will happen.
It would be quite good to do, which a lot of people were doing during lockdown, doing these sort of Zoom, where you could have like your 4 or 5 all over the world, but you're all playing at the same time to the same track. If you know what I mean. I saw quite a few with Billy Idol, you know, where you get lots of people and then suddenly he comes in, but it's all live, you know. It was quite an amazing thing, really. So maybe something like that.
Well, I think that, you know, I have a sense of when old people try and get their bands back or do what they were doing many, many years ago, it's because they can't do anything else. Well, back in our day, when we were sort of on the up, a couple of times we played with Gary Glitter, and he was kind of sad at that moment in time, because he didn't have all the money he used to have, so he didn't have the big production, he didn't even have the glitter band, he had a few old people that would play for cheap, I guess, and the audience was insulting him and spitting at him and things. And so it was really very degrading for somebody who was a huge star when we were kids, you know?
Indeed.
And so occasionally when we talk, you know, the Classix guys about years ago, it was a very short period in our lives. As I said, it was 6 or 7 years of our lives, and we've done a lot of living since then. And so there's still a lot of things that I would like to do rather than going back to what I did when I didn't know any better. That's how I put it.
I think you may be right what you said at the beginning, whereas maybe sometimes it's best to leave the past. I mean, I hear Paul McCartney singing nowadays, and I think, no, your voice is gone, don't do it. You know, you're making your own songs sound bad now.
Well, you know, you always think you can do it better. And so if I did a Classix Nouveaux track now, then everything would sound different, because I know how to make music much better. So all the imperfections that made it what it was would not be there. And secondly, your sound and your style changes, especially for me, a vocalist. You don't sound the same 30, 40 years ago. I've seen Elton John sometimes speaking about how high his voice used to be when he was young, and he's surprised when he hears it. And BP, actually, a drummer, asked me not so long back about the screaming I used to do in the Classix days. He said, can you still do that? I said, I don't think I can do it, because you know what they say about if you don't use a muscle, you lose it. And so I haven't been screaming for 30 odd years, so I don't think I could. On the other hand, I saw a live video on YouTube not so long back of Aha doing Take on Me, a huge concert in Brazil or something. And he did it perfectly. And I said, well, obviously he's still got it because he's still been using it. That must be what he's been doing for 40 years. But that's not what I've been doing for 40 years.
No, maybe you don't want to try it.
well, yeah, I was gonna say that what I would consider good singing now is not what I thought was good singing 40 years ago. And
he's
so the fans would be disappointed because they're attached to the sound of their youth. So it's better to not mess with that.
You're right. You're right. I mean, personally, I'd love it, and I know a lot of people who would love it. But I think you're spot on. That you know, I went to see Steve Strange Vidage before he died. It was terrible. I mean, the guy can't. You know, I don't know if he ever could sing, but he definitely couldn't sing that night. You know, and it's almost like someone you've seen as a bit of an idol, or you know, Visage and all this, and to watch it was, yeah. I wish I hadn't.
One of the things we get here in the States, often on a Sunday, there'll be old artists from many, many years ago coming back and doing their old hits. So you can get people like Petula Clark. I don't know if she's still alive. Anyway, I remember one time seeing Eric Burden, and he had white hair and he was fat. And I guess he was singing "House of the Rising Sun" or something. I thought, well, I'd like to see an old video from the '60s. Really, that'd be better.
Yes, yeah. You're right. It would be better.
I read that Cliff had his 80th birthday this week, so that's pretty amazing.
Funny enough, I heard one of his new songs on the radio. I'm not a fan of Cliff Richard. Well, the odd track. But for someone who's 80 with his new song, I thought, you know what, you can sing, you know, and he was still hitting quite some good notes, you know, high notes and that. And for an 80-year-old, good for him, you know.
I've met him a couple of times, and he's very nice. He's very genuine, and so I'm always like you. I wouldn't say I'm particularly a fan of the music. First of all, in his early days, it was a bit before my time, and then by the time I was doing music, his music was a bit sort of safe and sanitized for where we were at. But so very, very nice guy, and you got to hand it to him. You know, how many other people have had a 60-year career? So
I haven't heard anyone at 80 sing as good as he does. I mean, Elton John, McCartney, they need to stop, you know, because it doesn't sound good anymore, you know, and the more they come on stage or do something, the worse it's getting, you know. I know it's in their blood and they want to do it and all this, but it doesn't sound good.
But it's like I said, I don't think they can do anything else.
No, of course not.
And so that's the trouble. I think you mentioned Paul McCartney. I saw I guess it was the Carpool Karaoke with James Corden.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that a lot more than anything I've ever seen with Paul McCartney in the last kind of 50 years. So doing something different might be a good idea.
Yeah, indeed. But Sal, it's been fantastic talking to you, and I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's been amazing. We did meet 30 odd years ago, probably 40 years ago, come think of it. But
you better stop there and don't keep aging us all. You know, let's imagine it was yesterday.
It was yesterday. I remember I was in a record shop in Norwich, and I just picked out a Nash the Slash single, and I got this tap on the shoulder. I turned around and it was you. I don't know if it was your manager or whoever it was, because you had this big black hat on and everything. And I think it was just after West Runton, because you said, "Oh, Steve, how's it going?" I'm thinking, who the hell is he? but it came to me. So yeah. And you actually signed a 12-inch single, and I've still got it somewhere. So
well, frame it. Kids don't know about them.
It was guilty, actually. Guilty, a 12-inch of Guilty. Yeah.
Oh, there's a good one. All right, well, thanks for the chat. It's nice to check in with my homeland, and so all the best. All right.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, mate. I really appreciate it, and all the best for the future. And maybe we'll catch up again soon one day.
Okay, bye.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, mate.